Morning light seeped through the thin curtains of a tiny apartment, spilling over the warmth of two bodies entwined in quiet laughter. Emma had never felt more certain of love. Daniel's voice wrapped around her dreams, whispering futures filled with possibility. They spoke of travel, of shared ambitions, of a someday that felt so close she could taste it. But beneath the sweetness, she sensed the fragility. The way his gaze sometimes lingered on the door, as though the world outside might call him away. When she held the pregnancy test in her trembling hands, the air changed. Joy surged, but fear followed fast behind. The moment she showed him, his smile faltered, and silence swallowed the room. Love met reality, and the fairy tale began to crack. The days that followed were a blur of silence and disbelief. Emma moved through the motions, brushing her hair, making tea, staring at her reflection. But the world had lost color. Each morning she expected a message, a knock, a sign that Daniel's absence was a mistake. None came. Bills stacked on the counter, and reality pressed harder than grief. In the stillness of her apartment, she whispered to the tiny heartbeat growing inside her that they would be okay. It was a promise born of desperation, but it kept her standing. When she felt the first flutter in her belly weeks later, she realized love hadn't left her. It had simply changed shape. Weeks turned into months, and Emma learned to breathe again. She found a job at a small local firm, answering phones and filing papers. The pay was meager, but it was something solid. Every kick reminded her why she couldn't give up. She began to smile again, softly, shyly, whenever someone asked about the baby. In the mirror of the office restroom, she would trace the curve of her belly and whisper names. The ache of Daniel's absence dulled, replaced by a fierce determination. She was building something alone, something pure and strong. When the contractions started one rainy night, she was alone. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear, but Emma clung to courage. Hours later, when the nurse placed a tiny bundle in her arms, time stopped. The child's cry pierced through every shadow of abandonment. Emma looked down and saw not what she had lost, but what she had gained. Her daughter's eyes mirrored her own, soft, searching, and unbroken. In that moment, Emma was no longer the woman Daniel left. She was something new, something unshakable. Days later, Emma stood by the hospital window holding her baby, watching rain trace silver lines down the glass. The world outside was vast and uncertain, but she no longer feared it. The pain of being left had given way to something far greater: purpose. She whispered to the tiny girl in her arms, promising a life filled with love, even if it came from just one heart. In the reflection, she saw strength she never knew she had. Her story had broken open, but from its fracture, something beautiful was beginning to grow. The apartment had changed. Gone were the remnants of shared memories, replaced by shelves of baby bottles, bills, and textbooks. Emma woke before sunrise every morning, balancing motherhood and exhaustion. Lily's soft cries punctuated the night, but so did Emma's whispered affirmations. "We're going to make it." She worked part-time at the firm, studying at night by the flickering light of her laptop. Every challenge became a brick in her foundation. The ache of abandonment remained, but it no longer defined her. Each morning, she dressed with quiet purpose, a woman shaped not by what she'd lost, but by what she refused to surrender. The firm's office buzzed with ringing phones and restless ambition. Emma's desk sat near the back, invisible to most, yet her presence grounded the chaos. She absorbed every task, every detail, learning more than her job required. Between lunch breaks and daycare pickups, she became indispensable. Her supervisor began to notice, quietly handing her responsibilities that others avoided. When pay raises passed her by, she didn't complain. Instead, she sharpened her resolve. Each keystroke, each late night, was another step toward the life she promised Lily. Her dreams no longer spoke in grand gestures. They whispered in the sound of progress. Nights were her sanctuary. After putting Lily to sleep, Emma transformed the kitchen into her study. The hum of the refrigerator mixed with the scratching of her pen and the soft rise of her daughter's breathing. She studied marketing strategies, business ethics, leadership, feeding her mind while rocking the cradle of her future. When fatigue blurred the lines of her vision, she reminded herself that every late hour would one day pay off. The world that had once turned its back on her was slowly, stubbornly, becoming hers to command. Years passed and ambition took root. Emma earned her degree, and with it, a doorway opened. A larger firm offered her a position, junior marketing associate. She packed what little they had, moved to a new city, and started over. The apartment was small, but the skyline outside the window promised more. Each morning she dressed Lily for preschool, their laughter echoing through narrow hallways that smelled of coffee and hope. The city didn't know her story, and that anonymity was freedom. For the first time in years, Emma smiled without hesitation, not because life was easy, but because it was hers. Success never came in a single moment. It crept in, disguised as small victories. Emma's work earned recognition, then promotion. Her confidence grew alongside Lily's laughter. Evenings became filled with stories and homework, not silence. Sometimes she still thought of Daniel, not with anger, but as a distant lesson in what love should not be. Her heart, once fractured, now pulsed with pride. She had built a life from ashes, one decision at a time. As she tucked Lily into bed that night, the city lights flickering through the window, she realized she had already won, not by finding someone new, but by finding herself. The elevator's mirrored walls reflected a woman Emma barely recognized, tailored, confident, unreadable. The golden nameplate on her folder bore her new title, Regional Director. The doors slid open to reveal a modern office humming with quiet power. Every step she took echoed years of sacrifice. Colleagues watched with curiosity as she strode through glass corridors, heels clicking like punctuation marks to her ascent. When she entered the boardroom, the air stilled. At the far end of the table, Daniel looked up from his papers. Older now, the same eyes that once promised forever widening in disbelief. Emma's heartbeat thundered, but her voice remained calm. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Emma Lawson, your new boss." The meeting began with numbers and projections, but beneath the spreadsheet simmered memory. Daniel's voice wavered slightly when he presented. Emma caught it but gave no sign. She asked questions precisely, her tone detached, her eyes never lingering longer than required. Every glance between them carried the weight of unspoken years. The team admired her composure, unaware of the history pulsing beneath polite professionalism. When the meeting ended, Daniel approached her, lips parting to speak her name. She raised a hand slightly, stopping him with a smile sharp as glass. "Send me reports by Monday." Then she turned and walked away, leaving him in the silence he once gave her. Back in her office, Emma closed the door and let the composure crack, just enough for a single deep breath. The skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, indifferent to her turmoil. She traced the edges of her ID badge, the title embossed beneath her name, proof of everything she had built. Yet the sound of his voice still lingered, stirring something buried. For years she'd imagined this moment as victory. Now it felt heavier, quieter. Power didn't erase pain. It merely gave her control over how to face it. Her phone buzzed with a message from home, a photo of Lily drawing at the kitchen table. Emma smiled faintly. This, she thought, is what matters. Daniel lingered outside her office that afternoon, the weight of unfinished words pulling him closer. Through the glass, he saw her laughing briefly with a colleague, a sound he hadn't heard in years, one he'd once taken for granted. When he finally knocked, Emma looked up, her expression professional but guarded. Lawson, he began, his voice faltering. She gestured for him to sit, and for a moment, time folded, the past and present overlapping in fragile tension. He tried to explain, to justify, but she met his gaze evenly. "We'll keep things professional, Mr. Reed," she said softly, her tone calm but unyielding. That's all there's left to say. That evening the office emptied, leaving only the hum of lights and the faint city murmur below. Emma stood by the window again, watching the skyline flicker alive. Behind her, Daniel gathered his things in silence, their reflections crossing in the glass. He paused by the door. "You've changed?" he said quietly. She didn't turn. "I had to." The weight of those words hung between them, not accusation but truth. When the door finally closed, Emma exhaled, her shoulders trembling slightly before straightening once more. She had faced the ghost of her past and remained standing. For the first time, power didn't feel like armor. It felt like freedom. The following week arrived with a challenge. A high-profile client presentation that could make or break the division. Emma led the project, but Daniel's expertise was crucial. Their collaboration was inevitable. Meetings were taught, words precise but eyes avoiding. Each shared spreadsheet and revised proposal became an unspoken conversation about what they once shared and what now divided them. When Daniel offered an idea that was genuinely good, Emma paused before nodding approval. It wasn't forgiveness, it was professionalism. Yet something in his quiet humility unsettled her. He wasn't the reckless man she remembered. He seemed haunted, tempered. For the first time, she didn't see the man who left, only the one trying to make things right. Late nights at the office blurred into routine. Under the soft hum of computers, Emma caught herself stealing glances. Not of longing, but curiosity. Daniel no longer filled silences with arrogance. Instead, he listened, contributed, and stayed late without complaint. Once, she found him adjusting the projector wires while others had gone home. Sleeves rolled, concentration etched across his face. When he looked up, their eyes met. An echo of something long buried flickered. The moment broke with a phone's buzz, yet it lingered. Emma returned to her desk unsettled. She reminded herself, he was just an employee. But her pulse told another story. As the deadline neared, fatigue stripped away their emotional armor. They argued, fiercely, honestly, about strategy and risk. Daniel's voice rose, Emma's tone sharpened like steel. "You're still running from responsibility," she snapped before catching herself. The silence afterward was raw and electric. Daniel's reply was quiet, pained. "Not anymore." The words struck deeper than either expected. Something in his gaze spoke of years lived in regret. Emma turned away, pretending to read the figures on her screen, but the numbers blurred. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe he might truly have changed. The presentation day arrived like a storm breaking. In the boardroom, executives filled the seats, eyes sharp with expectation. Emma led with calm precision, her voice steady as she guided through projections and visuals. When it was Daniel's turn, he spoke with quiet confidence, his data flawless, his delivery sincere. The room responded, impressed, attentive. Emma watched him, proud, despite herself. When the deal closed successfully, applause followed. Daniel glanced her way, and for the first time she met his gaze fully, offering the smallest nod, acknowledgement, not affection. Still, that simple gesture felt monumental. That night, the team celebrated at a rooftop bar overlooking the city. Laughter and champagne filled the air, but beneath the glow of string lights, Emma stood apart, watching the skyline. Daniel approached quietly, holding 2 glasses. "Congratulations," he said, his tone cautious. She accepted the drink, the city's reflection dancing in her eyes. For a moment, words failed them. "You'd good work," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "So did you." The distance between them softened, replaced by a fragile understanding. The wounds weren't gone, but perhaps they no longer needed to define them. Beneath the hum of the city, forgiveness began, not spoken but felt. The night after the celebration, the office was nearly empty when Emma returned for a forgotten file. The elevator opened to reveal Daniel, the same idea in his mind. Their eyes met, the air taut with everything unspoken. "We keep running into each other," he said, half smiling, half nervous. She didn't answer, just brushed past him to her office. But he followed, the need for closure tugging at his steps. "Emma," he said quietly, "please, just let me talk." Her fingers froze on the doorknob. For years, she'd imagined what she'd say if this moment came. Now, the words felt fragile in her throat. "Talk then," she whispered, without turning. Inside the office, silence filled the space where logic usually ruled. Daniel stood near the window, his voice low but steady. "I was scared," he began. "Back then. You deserve someone stronger." "I wasn't," Emma laughed. Short, bitter, but honest. "You think that's what I needed? Strength that walks away." His gaze fell to the floor. "I thought I'd ruin your life if I stayed." She turned toward him, her eyes sharp with tears she refused to shed. "You did." "You did. But I rebuilt it anyway." The words hit like glass shattering, not to wound, but to release. And in that wreckage, truth stood bare. Silence stretched until it became unbearable. Daniel moved closer, his voice trembling. "I've thought about you every day, about her, our daughter." The mention of Lily's name shattered Emma's control. She faced him fully, anger and sorrow colliding. "You don't get to say her name like it means something to you." Tears welled despite her resistance. Daniel's own eyes glossed with regret. "I know, but I want to make it right." Her voice broke, softer now. "You can't rewrite the years you missed." He nodded, defeated. Yet in his stillness she saw sincerity, the kind that doesn't beg, but owns its failure. The storm outside mirrored the one inside, rain streaking the windows, thunder rolling through the glass. Emma turned away, staring at the city lights through tears. "You left when I needed you most," she said quietly. "And now you want... what? Redemption?" Daniel's voice cracked. "No, I just want to be allowed to care." The honesty in his tone disarmed her. For a moment, she saw not the man who abandoned her, but one haunted by his own cowardice. She exhaled, the weight of years loosening slightly. "Caring is easy," she murmured. "Staying, that's the hard part." Yet even as she said it, something inside her softened. The argument faded into quiet. Daniel approached slowly, stopping a breath away. "You're right," he said. "I can't undo what I did, but if you ever let me, I'll spend every day proving I've changed." Emma looked at him, her tears now still. "Don't prove it to me," she whispered. "Prove it to her." She gathered her things, the conversation's weight lingering in the silence that followed. As she walked out into the corridor, her reflection caught in the glass once more. The same woman, but lighter somehow. Outside, the rain had stopped. A fragile peace had begun to form, quiet and unsure, but real. In the days that followed, Daniel kept his distance, but his presence was felt. He stayed late to finish reports, fixed issues without complaint, and quietly shielded the team from upper management's scrutiny. Emma noticed, though she never acknowledged it aloud. When their paths crossed, there was no tension now, just a quiet professionalism that carried something gentler beneath. Late one evening, she found a stack of completed work on her desk with a note in neat handwriting. You shouldn't have to carry it all alone." She stared at it for a long moment before placing it in her drawer. The gesture unsettled her, because it felt sincere. Outside the office, life moved forward. One Saturday, Emma attended Lily's school art fair. The room smelled of paint and laughter. As Lily tugged her hand toward her exhibit, Emma froze. Daniel stood across the room, helping a volunteer set up decorations. He looked surprised but didn't approach. Instead, he gave Lily a small wave and a hesitant smile. Emma watched her daughter beam back, unaware of the history between them. It was a strange piece, fragile, tentative. For the first time, Emma didn't feel anger at his presence. Instead, she felt the quiet possibility of healing, something she hadn't thought possible. Back at work, the distance between Emma and Daniel shifted again. No longer avoidance, but respect. When she struggled to balance deadlines and a sick child at home, Daniel quietly stepped in, taking over her presentations without being asked. He never made it known, never sought praise. Word of his reliability spread, and even Emma's superior noticed. "You've built quite a team," her boss said. Emma smiled faintly, glancing toward Daniel across the office. He caught her look. Not a smile, not quite, but something deeper. Acknowledgement. The walls between them were no longer walls, only boundaries being redrawn. That evening, Daniel stopped by Emma's office to return some files. Lily's drawing hung on the wall, a childlike sketch of a family under a bright sun. His eyes lingered on it before he spoke. "She's talented," he said softly. Emma nodded. "She's her own person?" Daniel smiled faintly. "She deserves to know who I am, not what I was." The honesty disarmed her. For a moment, she saw not the man who broke her, but the father Lily might someday need. "Maybe," she said finally, "but only if you keep showing up." The words were both challenge and permission. The smallest door opening. Weeks passed, and something new began to grow. Not romance, not yet, but understanding. Emma saw Daniel's quiet steadiness, his care for their team, and his patience with Lily when they occasionally crossed paths. The bitterness that once colored every memory began to fade into acceptance. One evening, as she walked Lily home from school, her daughter looked up and asked, "Mom, is Mr. Reed your friend?" Emma paused, then smiled gently. "He's learning to be." Lily grinned and skipped ahead, her laughter echoing down the quiet street. For the first time, Emma felt her heart lighten. Not because she needed Daniel, but because she no longer needed to hate him. Autumn deepened, and the company's rhythm softened into a calm Emma hadn't felt in years. She noticed how Daniel no longer sought her approval. He simply did his work well and let integrity speak for him. The change in him mirrored her own growth. She wasn't the woman who'd been left behind. She was the woman who had learned to rise. One morning, as they rode the elevator together, silence stretched comfortably between them. "You've built something remarkable," he said finally. She smiled, not with pride, but peace. "So have you." For the first time, they spoke not as adversaries or former lovers, but as equals who'd both survived themselves. That weekend, Emma invited Daniel to meet Lily properly. Not at work, not by chance, but with intention. They met at a quiet park, bathed in afternoon light. Lily's laughter filled the air as she ran between them, her energy bridging what years had broken. Daniel knelt to her height, unsure, his voice gentle. "Hi, Lily." The girl studied him, curious but open, then offered her hand. "Mom says you're her friend." He smiled, tears brightening his eyes. "I'd like to be yours, too." Emma watched the scene, her heart trembling with something that felt like forgiveness, not a gift to him, but a release for herself. Over the weeks that followed, Daniel became a quiet constant. He joined Lily and Emma for small things, a science fair, Sunday breakfasts, evening walks. Each moment was ordinary, yet profound in its simplicity. He never asked for more than what she offered, and she began to see how change wasn't in grand gestures but in quiet consistency. One evening, after walking Lily home, Daniel lingered by the doorway. "Thank you," he said simply. Emma met his gaze, the same eyes that once broke her, now honest and unguarded. "For what? For letting me try." She didn't answer, but the faint smile she gave was answer enough. Winter arrived gently, painting the city in silver and quiet. Emma's office overlooked the skyline, lights twinkling like constellations of her past and future intertwined. Daniel entered with the quarterly report, confident, professional, and utterly at peace. "We did well," he said. She smiled. "We did." As he turned to leave, she stopped him. "Daniel," she said softly, "I forgive you." The words landed softly, but their echo filled the room. His shoulders eased, his eyes glistened. Not from relief alone, but gratitude. Forgiveness didn't erase the past. It simply unchained her from it. In that silence, they both exhaled, lighter at last. Months later, spring returned, tender and green. Emma took Lily to the park where it had all begun, now alive with blossoms. Daniel joined them, not as a guest, but as part of their rhythm. They laughed together, the weight of the past replaced by the grace of presence. As Lily ran ahead chasing bubbles, Daniel turned to Emma. "Do you ever think about what might have been?" She smiled softly. "No, I think about what is." The wind carried her hair across her face. He reached to brush it aside, but stopped midway. She caught his hand, briefly, deliberately. Some stories don't restart, they evolve. This was theirs.